Hello and welcome to Boston Magazine's 10th annual Taste event presented by Stella Artois. I'm Scott Kearnan, Boston Magazine's food and entertainment editor, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. Now, as you know, we have a series of virtual conversations and demos taking place all week long, as well as our Taste Passport program brought to you by Maker's Mark, which gives everyone access to over 60 exclusive dining and takeout deals through December 30th. Now, with the purchase of your ticket, you are also supporting Mass Restaurants United, which is an incredible organization that was founded out of the need for advocacy and support for Boston's restaurant industry throughout this pandemic. As Massachusetts restaurants continue to fight for their survival, I urge all of you to take advantage of the incredible Taste Passport program, which will support Mass Restaurants United in that fight, as well as support all of your favorite restaurants. Now, although Taste may look a little bit different this year, we are glad to be bringing you all the content and conversations that are meeting the moment where we are right now. Never before have restaurants had more challenges and obstacles in terms of operating safely and profitably during a pandemic. Few are more aware of these challenges than my upcoming guests, amazing restaurant operators, but have also taken on incredible advocacy roles during this time. So before we dive in, I'd like to first take a brief moment to thank our Taste 2020 sponsors, presenting sponsor Stella Artois, Passport sponsor Maker's Mark, and Aquapana. Now, a brief word from Maker's Mark.
It's not easy crafting the distinctive full-flavored taste of Maker's Mark. Getting all our water from our very own limestone filtered lake. Getting red winter wheat instead of the usual rye from this one family farm. And aging to taste by constantly sipping bourbon. Wait, all this sounds pretty nice actually. No wonder we've been doing it this way for so long. This season, give our best to yours.
Welcome back to Boston Magazine's Taste, presented by Stella Artois. Tonight, I'm honored to introduce you to three local restaurant operators and civic leaders who are devoted to saving Boston's restaurants. With me today, Nia Grace, owner and operator of Daryl's Corner Bar and Kitchen, Cheryl Straughter, chef and owner of Soleil, and Tracy Chang, chef and owner of Pagu. Hello, Nia. Hello, Cheryl. And hello, Tracy.
Hello.
Hi, Scott.
Hey, Scott.
Thanks so much for joining us this evening. Really appreciate it. I know you've got so much going on and so much to do during this really unprecedented time for the industry. So we're really grateful for you to share your stories and what you've been doing during this time. Before we kind of get into the specifics of this wild pandemic era, I wanted to give each of you a moment first to just talk a little bit about yourselves and your restaurants, what you do there, and sort of the kind of personality and identity that you bring to those spaces. So, Nia, I'll start with you. Tell us, if you would, just a little bit about yourself and the history of Daryl's.
Great. Thanks for having us. I'm from Boston, Roxbury area I grew up in, and I am the owner and proprietor of Daryl's Corner Bar and Kitchen. We live on the corner of Columbus Avenue in Northampton and Roxbury South End, and we're known for Southern comfort food and having a warm environment. We have live music, and so that's kind of, the piece that really attracts our guests, and we're really excited to be a part of this program.
Absolutely. And that space there has a very long history as well in the community and with live music and food in particular.
Yes, absolutely. We've been in the community since, I would say, 1957. If we got our starts off as Bob the Chef, the original owner was Robert Morgan, and, it was your quintessential soul food. It was served diner style, family environment. Since then we had a different owner under Daryl Settles, and the business rebranded in 2010 for Daryl's Corner Bar and Kitchen. Since then, I took ownership in 2018, and it's been a joy for me to be able to continue on like the generational history of food and friends and music. My parents used to go there. I'm happy to see, my nieces and nephews be able to come there. It's truly your neighborhood bar. And we're more than a bar. We're definitely rooted in community, in partnership with, my sister here, Cheryl from Soleil and others. And so really great. It's a community gem. And so happy to have it a part of the landscape.
Absolutely. Definitely a Boston landmark by any name. And thank you for that segue to our next guest, Cheryl. Cheryl, tell us a little bit about Soleil and your history and what you've been doing there.
Sure. Well, welcome to Soleil. We are located in Roxbury. And in particular, we are in the Bruce Bowling Municipal Building, which is the headquarters of the Boston School Department in Nubian Square. So our cuisine is also Southern, but with a little bit of a twist. When you think of Southern food, there is a thought that runs through your mind. And we might add a certain spice or a different ingredient just to make it funky. Our atmosphere is warm, family style. Also, a lot of office employees come in, used to. So we're living through this pandemic and doing the best that we can. We opened in 2018, and Soleil is named after my granddaughter. And in French, the term soleil means the sun, and it is also my granddaughter's middle name. So welcome to Soleil.
I love that. And we could all definitely use as much sunshine in our life as possible right now. So I love that. Thank you so much, Cheryl. Tracy, tell us a little bit about your history and what you've been doing at Pagu over these last few years.
Yeah, so we opened Pagu in Cambridge, Massachusetts, between Harvard and MIT, between Central and Kendall Square there, about 3.5, 4 years ago. And we are a Spanish-Japanese tapas restaurant. We also serve the community in many different ways, doing events like weddings and corporate buyouts and board meetings, recruiting events. And we also work closely with the schools in the area, with this Harvard Science and Cooking program, Nuvu Studios down the street, and MIT as well. And yeah, during these times, it's been quite difficult to do anything events-wise, but we definitely have been busy launching some new initiatives.
Fantastic, and can't wait to hear a little bit more about what you've been doing to pivot, which I know is a word that we're all so sick of hearing, but nonetheless to adapt and evolve during these crazy times. Before we get to that, though, I think it's really important for people to understand how serious this really is for the restaurant industry. Before we talk about solutions, we have to talk about the problem. So I'll start with you, Nia. Could you help me understand and help our viewers understand a little bit about how the last 8 or so months now has really impacted your business in terms of staffing, in terms of the ability to keep the lights on? What's that been like for y'all?
I think about how the fact that our industry is driven on people, and it starts with the people who are at the helm of the service end of it. And so for us, we're living with angst and anxiety, and that's already, a situation that, affects how we show up daily. And so, once we get to that point and we really start to look at the realization of what it's done to our businesses with the loss of revenue, our business looks at, we're seeing maybe only 40% of what we actualized last. And we think that that's going to be, a quote unquote strong finish, for 2020 at this point. At that, we also have seen, service points kind of, be sacrificed as we've had transition with staffing. I think it's devastating to say the least, but I think that we talk about this being a very resilient industry, of us being a resilient people. And so that's what we had to do. We just had to kind of, keep getting back up and figuring the next thing out. But it's been hard to plan when things are so uncertain.
Absolutely. And something that I know we've spoken about in the past is the fact that Daryl's having this history with live music. You also are a really important place for local musicians and artists to do their work as well. It's not just folks in the food and beverage industry. There's also a lot of musicians that depend on businesses like yours to give them a platform and a paycheck.
Absolutely. We talk about our family of, employees extending beyond, like you said, the people who are serving daily. Our gig musicians, we probably employ about 50 different bands, and, times that by 3 to 4 people in each band, we're affecting a lot of different households. And so we've been trying to do virtual events and see how that, really kind of helps them out. But it's definitely not the same.
Absolutely. Cheryl, you mentioned that right now, there's not as much activity, it sounds like, around the municipal building there in Nubian Square, which is unfortunate because there has been so much activity happening in recent years. And I wanted to learn a little bit more about the change that you're seeing and how that's affected your business right now.
Sure. And it's affected us in a number of different ways. So our revenue stream is down, as Nia shared. For me, it's 40 to 45%. The office building is pretty much vacant as the staff work from home. We also lost the revenue stream from a lot of our catering clientele. In addition to that, back of Soleil for private events. And since people are not meeting in groups, that is affecting our bottom line as well. So just in general, the whole feel of our industry has changed as people are working from home, protecting themselves, and rightfully so. It's just extremely quiet. And we depend on local foot traffic as well. We're right beside a thriving transportation line, but you even see there that there are not as many commuters. So it's affecting all of our revenue streams.
Absolutely. And Tracy, tell us a little bit about what's been going on over in Cambridge on that side of the river, and from your experience at Pagu, the impact that you're seeing.
Yeah, so similar to Cheryl, all of our events and catering are pretty much shut down. Our neighborhood consists of a lot of businesses, primarily pharmaceutical, technological, and a lot of these folks can work from home and are similarly no longer congregating, thankfully, as we can remember that Biogen outbreak a couple months ago. We still do have some, residential folks who come for takeout, and thankfully on, beautiful days for the patio dining. But as we all know, Boston winters can be quite brutal. And for us, the patio is usually shut down shortly after Labor Day. This year, we're lucky to have, pretty solid weather and I guess just good support from the neighborhood, feeling safe to come out as we've communicated the actions that we're taking to make outdoor dining safe. We are not doing any indoor dining. So we, are continuing to serve the community in terms of our regular kind of food and beverage programming. But it's certainly, not enough in terms of contributing to the bottom line. We're 80 to 90% lower in sales. We've gone from 36 employees to anywhere between 4 to 8 employees. So those are pretty extreme numbers.
Absolutely. And I think it's important too for folks to realize or remember that, even in the best of times, restaurants run on pretty slim margins. Is that fair to say, Tracy?
For sure. I mean, the average profit margin for a restaurant pre-COVID is 10% if you're lucky. And if you're able to do things like events and catering, usually the margins are a bit better there. But they're, still sub 15%, and the overall is around 10%. Now, as many people have become kind of takeout businesses, what's also challenging is that a lot of these third-party deliveries they take 30%. So if you do the math there, there's not much left for the restaurant business to take. So it's really not a sustainable model. And I think those kind of challenges really have pushed us, on the show today to, like you said, pivot, to adapt, to evolve, to listen to our community needs, and to do more than just takeout and patio.
Absolutely. Takeout and patio dining alone cannot save the industry. And I think you also just shared a really important reminder for folks to, wherever possible, order directly from restaurants so that they can maximize their spending, as opposed to going through some of those third-party services. We all have to sometimes, hey, but whenever you can, please support your restaurants directly. In terms of these pivots and evolutions, Cheryl, tell me a little bit about what you've been doing differently at Soleil to feed people differently, to run your business differently. What have you been doing?
So we did take advantage of the outdoor dining. And typically when you think of that, it's either a sit-down service or you grab something to eat and seat yourself. What we did was we had a grill outside and we were doing burgers and hot dogs and hot beef sausage, more of a grab and go style. Again, it just fit in with our location. So that was one pivot that we made, was outdoor food applications. We also closed for a little while. And then when we reopened, we had a movie night. It was like a welcome back. So we had our guests order a movie and we delivered dinner. So it was like Friday night date night with Soleil. We are also doing family meals, which is a different pivot, if you will, for us, because typically we were doing individual meals and catering. So that's something new. We've also tweaked our menu as well. We reduced some of the items that were not as profitable because everything is based on your bottom line. So it gave us an opportunity to dive into some numbers to see where that thin profit margin really truly was. So we've made some adjustments, and although some of our guests are a little upset because their favorite omelet is still not on the menu, we just really had to think analytically what makes sense for us to survive. And that was some of the pivots that we made. We've also connected with a few more delivery companies. However, as was discussed, the fees are just astronomical. So we do encourage and ask our customers to order directly from us. And that seems to help because the public does want to support their local restaurants.
And Cheryl, you're also a regional representative for Mass Restaurants United. And I wanted to ask about that organization, again, for folks, the beneficiary of their tickets for the Taste Passport. What is the intention of Mass Restaurants United, and what have you been doing to try to garner more support and advocacy for restaurants during this time?
Thank you for, speaking about Mass Restaurants United. We are a coalition of independent Massachusetts restaurants out there really educating our guests, our customers, and the public just in general of the dire straits that we are in as an industry. This industry employs over 11 million people nationally. So you're talking about a lot of jobs on the line. Some of our advocacy, on the local level has obviously, it's been a challenge for people to understand how deeply this cuts. Nationally, it has been a challenge, but we advocate everywhere. Some of the things that we would like to see done is we want to see a cap on some of these third-party delivery companies. It's just gotten out of hand. We want to see some relief in our renewal of licenses. Some of us are not operating our full restaurants. So for example, folks coming in, they can't have a drink, but they're just scooting in and grabbing a meal. But the cost of our liquor license, our beer and wine license, it's the same. So we're looking to see if we can't get some relief with getting that prorated. We're looking for some disaster insurance that would help cover our business. So we have a list of things that we're working on that cut across Massachusetts and national support as well. So we're an advocacy group fighting to thrive, in this difficult time and keep our businesses going. Some restaurants have already closed. Long-standing restaurants that people have dined in, they've had, fond memories in, no longer exist. So is this the trajectory that we are going to remain on, or are we going to get some more support to help us stay alive during this crisis? See, we're asking for support during a time where everybody's hurting. It is a crisis, but this industry does need to be shored up.
100%. And Nia, as Cheryl just said, we've already seen, unfortunately, many restaurants close, and that's really going to determine what the face of Boston looks like going forward, because we don't want to be a city that loses all our independently owned restaurants. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Daryl's to get through this time, the pivots and evolutions that you've made there.
Some of the things that we've done to make those changes immediately, we had to go to a full takeout model. That was something that was really different for us. A lot of the piece about coming to Daryl's is also having that experience. So that was one of the things that we had to do initially. We tried to do virtual events. We actually have a virtual tasting that is coming up. Much like some of the other spaces where we would do private events, we would also host our own private events. And so that is something that we lost out on some, but back in June, we did do a music marathon on Juneteenth. So we're talking about those musicians that we work with throughout the year. We did 10 hours of live music that was streamed, online, social media. As we go into the fall, we're going to focus more on, kind of changing what our catering looks like as well. We lost a lot of, catering throughout the spring and the summer. Focusing on, more smaller households. We do have Thanksgiving catering packages that are available. We'll do that throughout the rest of the holidays as well. We're working with some of our brands to do cocktail kits. So you've got, things that you can make at home and some of your favorite recipes. And we're just trying to essentially figure out how much we can push out of this space. Much like, Cheryl and Tracy said, we've got these rents, that kind of required us to be fully occupational and fully sat and even overbooked. But, that's what we required. And now we're just trying to figure out what else can we do out of this space to get us through and for however long. Yeah,
absolutely. And Cheryl spoke a little bit about Mass Restaurants United and the work that organization is doing. You are co-founder of the Boston Black Hospitality Coalition, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about how that came about and, the sort of work that you're doing specifically around supporting restaurants that are owned by Black Bostonians and people of color.
Yeah. That work came about through a group of us who kind of looked at the disproportionate percentage of restaurants in the city of Boston that were owned by African Americans, specifically ones that even held liquor licenses. We're at 1% or less. And we understand that is a really good way to achieve wealth, within this industry and business. And so as we sat around kind of, looking at this situation, we knew that this is something that was affecting all restaurants, so we blindly, we don't walk into this not understanding that affected all restaurants, but we understood that the restaurants in our neighborhoods had it just a little bit harder, or at least in our situations. We had historically, been, underbanked and underinvested in, especially our main streets and our businesses. And so when we hit this wall, we were wondering what's going to happen next. We knew, kind of how much it took to get there. And we were wondering what's it going to take to keep us there. And so, our coalition was a matter of survival. That's where we, came out of. That's what it was derived out of, the urgent need for survival and, putting our heads together. If it was first just trying to figure out the PPP and where you could get it and what banks still had it and how you can easy as other people, or if it was a matter of, just figuring out what other resources are coming down from the city and state and being on alert for that to apply for those kind of fundings. And then if it was really just a matter of strategy on, what do we do right now? Because a lot of us, myself, I'm only 2 years as an owner. Before being an owner here, I was a manager. So, I was familiar with the business, but 2 years as an owner, I would never expected that in a year where we were seeing, great growth and a lot of traction, that we would just hit this wall. And so even me, I needed help with trying to figure out a pandemic plan, a crisis plan, just to, and so it was really derived out of how do we, make sure that we can survive and get through this hump. That's what it was derived from.
Absolutely. And as you've been doing this work, I'm curious, obviously it's one thing to sort of respond to something like a pandemic, but thinking ahead, what ideas or solutions have you identified to help break down some of these systemic inequities between Boston restaurant owners going forward? Like, what can we do beyond just responding to the here and now to try to break these things down in the future?
Well, I think a couple of things that, us as a coalition have thought about is that forward thinking, in terms of how can we be a financial resource within ourselves moving forward, so that when it comes to that emergency funding that we may not have qualified for or have had access to, there is something that you're always going to have access to within our community. When we think about it a little bit more than that, we know that it really depends on our partnerships and who we're working with and who are recognizing, the talent that we have in our community and contribute. And so things with the Convention and Visitors Bureau or the hotels and other restaurant groups, even on work with Mass Restaurants United, the Massachusetts Restaurant Association. It's those kind of partnerships that are going to help kind of break down some of those inequities.
Absolutely. And one thing that's certainly been heartening, I guess, to see throughout all of this is that a lot of businesses are trying to find ways to both keep themselves afloat and stay solvent, while also finding these sort of larger solutions that can help build up and support their communities and neighborhoods. Tracy, to that point, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing at Pagu, and in particular, I know you've been doing a ton, but I'm curious to hear about the founding of Off Their Plate, which was, a movement that was really, really early on in this pandemic.
Yeah. So similar to both Cheryl and Nia, we tried doing everything that we could. So takeout, groceries. We had never run a grocery store before, and added over 170 SKUs to the market, meal kits, cocktail kits. And we realized, we also tried working with our neighbors like Clover and Lamplighter to provide ramen kits through their networks as well. And, it's all been very, very challenging and I guess like fun in a way, because as someone who studied business and who likes creating different kind of business ventures within our business, that's what we got to do, and we got to prototype all these different things. So that's kind of the bright side of what others might see as a kind of negative experience of survival. But the reality of it is that the sum of these parts is not enough. For us, rent is $20,000 a month. And, very quickly, when the pandemic was starting in March, we were realizing, that there's also this greater need to not just take care of ourselves, but other people that are struggling in the community. So other restaurants, other folks in healthcare who were becoming inundated with COVID-19. And it was a very, I think, kind of dark and scary period for a lot of folks, just living in the unknown and just watching COVID rates, rise. And my father's actually in healthcare, so I was, kind of close to that industry and felt like, there's something that we need to do for the greater community, not just cooking takeout, not just, doing groceries for Cambridge residents. And so that's kind of how Off Their Plate started. Was one of my regulars had reached out to me, Natalie, and she had been coming to the restaurant for the past few years as she was a student at Harvard Business School and is currently a student at Harvard Medical School. And she said, "Hey, I realized that we could, combine efforts and, there's people to feed and there's restaurants to feed them. And what if we got restaurants to make meals for healthcare centers? What does that take? Can you get other restaurants on board? Like how do you do that logistically?" And this was, just 3-4 days after Governor Baker had issued the shutdown and allowed essential workers, which included restaurants, to continue doing takeout. So what we did was we ran a pilot. I said, "Okay, let's do it and see how it goes. That's the only way we'll find out if this is doable and this is scalable, because this need is going to be a need across the country very soon." And I think because Boston was one of the harder hit cities and the earlier hit cities, we were very quick to mobilize. So March 19th, we sent 90 meals to Brigham and Women, and I said, "Yeah, I mean, restaurants know how to cook and we can figure out how to deliver foods." And, the one big flag for me was safety. Was how do we do this safely and responsibly? Because we don't want to be a part of the problem. And so we need to understand as much as we can about COVID-19, how it's spread, how we can keep our employees, our drivers, the recipients of the food, everyone involved in this project safe as possible. And so Natalie got working on the healthcare side and kind of onboarding healthcare centers, fundraising. I got to work on writing SOPs, standard operating procedures, talking to friends in science and safety and healthcare on the best practices that we could do, so that our model of feeding folks could extend beyond Boston, could reach New York City, could reach San Francisco, LA, Chicago, Seattle. So that was pretty much how Off Their Plate started. And eventually we were in 9 cities nationwide. We had over 200 volunteers, completely pro bono volunteers from across the country, everywhere across the country. I called up my friends to see how they were doing it, to learn from them. So I called up Nate Mook at World Central Kitchen. I called up Eric Bruner Yang at Power of 10 Initiative in DC, to understand how these guys were running their initiatives, so that we could share as much as possible with each other, so that we could all make sure that we were doing these things safely, and employees would be safe, and drivers would be safe, food would be safe to eat, etc.
Absolutely. Well, it's really impressive that something so successful could be executed on a national level safely in such a quick amount of time. It was such a rapid response to what was going on. So, kudos for that. And you mentioned a few moments ago as well that you have been, to whatever degree, circumstances aren't ideal, but enjoying the ability to think creatively and to come up with different business strategies within the business. I'm curious, do you think that's something going forward, even, once we have a vaccine or what have you, that more restaurants will be doing, kind of sprouting different arms or different branches beyond just being a place where you come in, you put down $20 or whatever, you order your plate and you leave? Is that where the future of restaurants is going around here?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people, kind of wonder and ask and, predict what the future of restaurants looks like, right? What new normal looks like. Um, and they also ask us, hey, are you guys going to continue doing, nonprofit work, continue feeding communities in need? As, thankfully, the healthcare need, eventually declined in June, and we shifted to feeding communities in need. And also in May, I co-founded another kind of mutual aid nonprofit called Project Restore Us to repackage groceries for families in need. And I think it's it's a two-way street, right? With restaurants and with these communities in need. These communities in need are going to be hurting for many months to come, at least 18 to 24 months ahead of us, right? Um, People are going to continue to be without employment, or suffering from having had COVID, or suffering from having lost key members of their families. And the most vulnerable people are these, um, people of color, women, low income, high COVID area, residents. And as someone who started, these initiatives because I wanted to, do the right thing and, feed more people, and I guess, feed the people who really needed to be fed. Like, we really changed from a restaurant who served the immediate community and served people who wanted to come out to eat at our restaurant, and usually for, some kind of a celebratory purpose, um, to serving people who need to eat. And I know that sounds a bit strange because everybody needs to eat at the end of the day. Um, but I do think that as a social responsibility, um, you know, my restaurant certainly, and I think other restaurants that have become involved in our projects, which are some of the most vulnerable businesses. Um, they are businesses owned by women, by people of color. They are businesses who cannot solely survive on takeout, on patio, on kits. I think they have also recognized that the need to feed these communities in need um, is going to be present for, like I said, 18 to 24 months ahead. So I think that we will continue to do that kind of work. And I hope that we evolve to, who knows if we start another nonprofit afterwards. But it really alters my mindset of what it means to be a restaurant, of what it means to be a restaurant owner. If you look up the etymology of the word, it means to restore. And so, I think a large part of our mission will be restoring, these livelihoods. Um, so we'll see, in what other forms that comes in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in terms of survival, Cheryl, in Massachusetts, roughly 1 out of every 10 people work in the restaurant industry. And we've already seen since the beginning of the pandemic, more than 20% of restaurants in Massachusetts have closed their doors in some capacity. In the work that you've been doing individually as part of Mass Restaurants United, what has been the big challenge, the big holdup to getting some real substantive relief, from financial relief, that is, from the city, from the state? Like, what's going on, and what have been the hurdles that we're hitting that have not led us to more clearly and full-throatedly support such a vital industry in this state?
I think that people don't realize how much it actually costs to be in business. I think in general, you see a restaurateur open their door, sell food, and then they get up and do the same thing. But behind that, behind the scene, you have merchant fees for your credit cards. You have unemployment that you're paying up into the pool. You have a number of expenses, not to mention, I mean, Tracy talked about her rent. We have rent, lights, electricity, gas, water. So before you can even think about a profit margin, you look at the debt load that you're carrying. And I think that people really don't understand how expensive it is to own and run a business. And the challenges that we have come up against is finding some funding that is not another loan. We don't need another loan on top of the loans that we all have to get the doors open, but we are challenged with finding enough grant money. And to Massachusetts' credit, there are grants that are out there. You know, we have one that is due on the 12th. So everybody's trying to swim in that same pool. And there's only so much money that is out there. And it's a challenge because we all need it. You know, what I need is the same thing that Tracy needs. It's the same thing that Nia needs, financial support. And that, I think, is what we've run up against, finding resources to help us get through this time.
Absolutely. Have you come up with any solutions that you would love to see implemented by the city or by the state, aside from, you know, just sort of straight up financial relief? For example, I remember in a previous conversation when we were chatting, you mentioned, you know, contracts and maybe the city turning more to restaurants to fulfill food orders and things like that. What other kind of solutions might be out there that we can consider?
So I just want to touch on that one a little bit. That one for me is very important. You know, getting contracts so that my staff knows that, hey, there is some work in front of us. We have these contracts that we are going to fulfill. And that's what I had chatted with you about. That's something that I would like to see some more conversation with the city as far as my business is concerned. What else can we do? At this time, it's hard, but we need some assistance in marketing our business. A lot of people don't know about Soleil, you know, so when you talk about what else is out there that's not financial, I am blessed that I am receiving some consultant hours that are gratis to me to help me grow my business. So if we could get more support in the operational side of what could help us grow, that would be a great thing. Money doesn't answer every question that we have. Sure, it's a great thing, but some of it is just insight of other professionals that can help us grow. Marketing, just design elements, how to deal with more efficient menus. So things like that would be helpful for a Soleil on the consultant side.
Absolutely. And Nia, do you have anything to add to that thread in terms of the other solutions that might be out there or worth exploring that maybe we haven't really tapped yet?
You know, I think how creative the cities and towns got with the outdoor dining and allowing people to, do parklets and take over different spaces. I think that we need to kind of think about that as we go into the winter months as well. You know, how can we winterize and how can the city lend support to maybe winterize some outdoor spaces that would allow our different restaurants to maybe vend or set up shop there as well, if it's doable, right? We know that that's not going to save us, but how can we continue to think about being creative in that way? One thing that, in terms of licenses and fees and renewal fees, the fact that they're, still the full rate for 2021, I think that there should be something done there too. And so I know that Cheryl and Tracy would agree there too. And so if we can keep in those veins, that would be excellent.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I'm personally hopeful that, some of these solutions that we've come up with during this time might be like genies that we can't quite put back in the bottle. Let's just do outdoor dining. Okay, let's just do that. Let's do cocktails to go. Why not? We've all proven we're responsible adults. We can handle this, people. Tracy, do you have anything else to add to this point of just sort of other solutions that maybe we haven't quite explored enough yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. The previous mentions definitely of marketing, PR, design elements. I found that what's also been helpful is just putting it out there that we need that kind of of help, and we've gotten volunteers reaching out to help fundraise, to help look for more grants, etc. But I think there does need to be something at greater scale, coming from the government, that aids in those kinds of elements, as well as rent relief, as well as just there's a lot of it seems to be there's a lot of red tape in places that doesn't really seem necessary. For instance, I was on a call with Boston Public Schools a couple of months ago, and they had mentioned, their challenges in trying to feed their students since COVID hit in March. And I shared with them how we had been successful in mobilizing so quickly to feed people via Off Their Plate, to reach families directly door to door with Project Restore Us with groceries that would last them for 4 weeks. And I've never run a nonprofit before, and I don't think it's really a bragging point. I think it's just when you get the right people to do it, that have the right mindset, that are very cautious about the health situations and safety situations, and you get a great group of volunteers that want to do it right for people in need. That's where the magic happens. And I was kind of disappointed to hear from BPS that the multiple challenges they were facing were kind of just these old rules, right? These old rules that were established by the city however many years ago, that was really holding up their ability to feed their students. And they still had over 50% of their students to reach, and these are students who usually depend on going to school to receive these meals. And I think that that would be a continued problem. And so I think legislatively, these kind of archaic rules need to change. Similar to how you had just mentioned, like the old rule of, oh, we can't sell, we can't sell alcohol to go, right? And look, now we're doing it, and we don't have we don't have like a prohibition on the horizon, right? We don't have major issues associated with alcohol consumption on the streets, or with drunk driving, etc., because of that change in that rule. So I hope that mindset changes in governance.
Absolutely. There's a lot of challenges everyone's going through now, still many more ahead. But I do want to, before we wrap up, remind everyone that even in these times, we've got to look for some rays of light. So on that note, Nia, I'm curious, can you tell me, where are you seeing moments of sort of hope or joy in the industry in all this? I'm sure that maybe right now they're in short supply, but are there things that you're seeing that are putting a little bit more of a spring in your step, or making you feel some kind of hope for the future?
Absolutely. I think about, again, restaurants that, are on this call with us now, who are still pushing on, who have new events happening, or different food offerings and different, times of day. I think the same thing about our restaurant, where we're able to still, kind of keep going to the well and getting new ideas to kind of stay relevant. I'm watching restaurants do that across the landscape, and so I think that is what's really inspiring, that it's kind of tapped into our creativity, I think, as Tracy talked about earlier, for us to stick around. And so as I actually, we do see restaurants that are closing, but we absolutely are watching restaurants or hearing about restaurant openings fairly regularly. And to me, that's really inspiring. I think that we are, kind of looking at some of our current models and realizing that, we probably needed to make some changes in order for us to really be here and present in the future and long lasting. So to me, all of it, I do find the silver lining often, in this moment. So I'm excited.
Absolutely. Cheryl, anything to add to that, just in terms of things that are maybe hopefully inspiring you a little bit?
Well, I'm a person that walks in faith, and I have to believe that we are going to turn this corner, although it's going to be a long journey before we get there. And what I see is a bright lane for Soleil is some of the catering opportunities that have come up for us on a more consistent basis, even and in spite of what's happening. So the word's getting out, to a couple of organizations that keep coming back to our well to reorder. So that's good for me, because anytime you can produce in mass, that helps your bottom line. And I liked what Tracy said regarding BPS. I had a very similar conversation, and it's interesting that there are so many archaic rules that prevent us from getting contracts because something that was written years ago and is not extremely relevant. So my conversation was, what if, I'll leave on this, what if some of the restaurants in the area of the particular schools were given the contracts to feed these kids? Does it have to come from a central kitchen? So that's the conversation that I'm having. So, if I can shine a Soleil light on the what if, that encourages me all the time just to keep going.
Absolutely. There's a lot of what ifs to answer, a lot of conversations we still need to have. And in terms of this conversation right here, I could talk to you forever, but you got businesses to run. So thank you so much for sharing your stories, the work you've been doing, and the work you'll continue to do going forward. Everyone, please continue to support these restaurants and so many others out there in Boston and the surrounding area. So thank you all again for joining us tonight. And to our viewers, thanks for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow for what is going to be an entertaining cooking demo and conversation with Giovanna Heike of La Fabrica Central, a Latin Caribbean restaurant in Cambridge's Central Square. So see you tomorrow, and thanks again. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.